Smash! Space Marines.
Hey, today I've got another episode of the Warhammer Hero Kitbash series, and we're kitbashing none other than Honsou of the Iron Warriors. This was a suggestion from my buddy Arthur, and I'm quite happy with what I was able to accomplish. He is a relatively simplistic looking character outside of the obvious, but I think I was able to pull it off pretty well. But before we get into the kit bashing, I just want to say thanks for 3,000 subscribers. That is friggin' bonkers. I really appreciate you, crawdads. And if you're not subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you did. And make sure to leave a like and a comment. Okay, I'll shut up and I'll get to the point now. So to start us out, I began with the legs of a Cataphractii Terminator. I was gonna jump on the bandwagon of using Death Guard Marines for the main armor, but I felt the Cataphractii legs and the torso I ended up picking out were a little bit easier to convert. Didn't have all those plague bits that I need to cover up. However, this is something that I do want to do later on, as this looks sick. Anyway, this might be a little hard to watch with how haphazardly I did this, but I snipped away at the core of the legs. The upper torso I intend to use is a little too small to fit, and I don't want him to be too tall. Said upper torso is an old Khorne Berserker body. I felt the chains and studs were perfect. It's a little small, but I think this gives him a more true-scale look. I did start sanding down the Khornite icon, but I ultimately decided to snip the lower torso away. This allowed me to glue this more snugly to the legs. But before doing so, I decided to use this Thousand Suns Sorcerer arm, and I'd attach a basic bitch pauldron to it. This totally wasn't a bit that I had glued onto an older mini, and the remnant of paint is just your imagination. After getting the arm glued to the torso, I would use some super glue to adhere the torso to the legs. This looks very ugly now, but don't you worry none. We'll be fixing this up momentarily. Not really sure why I said it like that. Going back to the Cataphractii bits, I'd snipped down this leather loincloth piece, and I have two uses for this. First, we'd wedge a piece of this into the torso and the legs. This is kind of acting as a weld with my Tamiya cement. Again, looks super uggo, but we're all painters here, we gotta trust the process. All that matters is these three torso coils are present. We then use the metal plate of the loincloth and apply it in its proper place. I'm not using the leather for obvious reasons. We'll actually end up using a second plate to cover up that ugly spot, after sanding it down good and properly. I think this makes him look really burly, and it's totally not acting as a rug to hide the mess beneath. At first I thought this kinda looked ugly having two identical belt buckle pieces on the same torso, but I think it looks really interesting after painting. Also, I'm sure you've noticed that I used a different pair of Cataphractii legs. This was purely because I wanted a more dynamic pose. I'll use those other legs for something else cool. Getting it to fit in place is relatively easy if you use Tamiya cement. As you can see, I kind of fussed with it just to make sure it stayed in place properly. Using thinner glue or Tamiya cement really allows you to fiddle with things and push them into place to your liking before they officially dry. And also, I'm making sure to sand down his feet so he applies to the base nicely. The leg change and the quirk really makes him stand out. He looks like a true hero character now. So for his axe, I initially used the power axe from the basic Chaos Marine kit, and this could work pretty well on its own. I ultimately decided, however, that I wanted to use this axe head from the Gellerpox Infected kit. We'd snip down the original blade, and I'd cut the head off of the other axe freely. I'd then shave away using my X-Acto knife, albeit in a rather unwise method. Cutting away from yourself can be just as, if not more detrimental when trimming minis. Case in point, much less leverage. The Gellerpox axe had these little studs, and I used it as a guideline for trimming. Undeniably, this made it easier to snip, but I didn't exactly think about the placement. I then sanded it down and glued it on, and this looked a little wonky, so I decided to trim it down a little more and sand it down, glue it on, place it back on, and there we go. I'm happy with this. Part of me kinda wishes I just ended up using the original axe, but I like how this looks and I think it's unique. For his melon, I used this head from the Kill Team Legionary kit. And no, the bionic eye is on the correct side, you're just insane, I'm not gaslighting you, you're a maniac. I probably could have used any of the trillion bald Robo-Eye Marine heads, but I like this one in particular because he has Perturabo cables in his noggin. Rule of cool, baby. After picking a pose I liked, I then glued on the axe. Looking pretty good so far. I then decided to use a little PVA glue and prep for the base, and I dunked him in some beach sand. Not super duper related, but I've had a lot of luck with this stuff. So here we are onto the most important part. I initially used this Flesh Golem mini from the Nulzer's line. In theory, this arm looks perfect, it actually looks identical to his main pose. This really was a journey as I was kinda scouring my entire hobby space for a bit that would do him service. And this is the closest thing I could find. But after snipping it off, wowie, not exactly proportional. But hey, I've been meaning to get this kit anyway. From the 8-bound kit, I used this absurdly detailed arm. We'll start by trimming away at the weapon and obscuring those fine details. First priority is snipping away and slicing off those weird vein tube things. His arm is supposed to be relatively crisp and shiny, and I did kind of fiddle with the idea of leaving these details on to make him a little bit more unique to me, but nah, I want to make him right. A bionic eye on the wrong side is one thing, getting his arm wrong is another. This kind of required a lot of work to get this right, as there's a lot of details that I really need to obscure to make it look correct to the actual character. After getting it to a place where I really liked it, I decided to glue it on. Obviously, I'm not done with this part, and there's huge portions that still need to be snipped, obscured, etc. However, I decided to wait for a little bit longer to clean up the arm, as I wanted to attach this pauldron from the Inquisitor Kill Team set. I'd sand down the iconography, of course, and I'd glue it in place, and I thought it looked really perfect. Also, yes, wink wink nudge nudge, I'm doing an Inquisitor Kill Team Kitbash. This is one of those Kitbash parts that really clicks. The 8-bound arm is rather flat on the deltoid, so attaching this was really seamless. As much as I love complicating my kitbashing by doing more convoluted methods, whenever pieces like this fit together, it's just super satisfying. Next, for his weird pointy knee spike thingies, I used the pommels of a couple Blood Angel's power swords. Sorry for the shite camera work, but I think it's pretty easy to figure out what I'm doing here. These are a weird couple of bits to use for this, but I think it works really well. Coming back to the arm, I'd begin by slicing away the tubes and these weird receptor things and sand them down. These pieces slice off relatively easy as they really jet out from the overall arm, but of course I'm trying to be as careful as possible not to slice into the actual arm itself. I'm more than fine with obscuring a little bit of the detail of the overall muscle as it'll look more akin to the actual character, but I want to remain cognizant of not slicing in too deep as it'll be a pain in the ass to clean and fix. I then add in some sprue goo and apply a little bit of Tamiya glue just to make it flow easier into the details and obscure them. Also, I prefer sprue goo. Apparently it's sprue glue, I don't care. Sprue goo über alles. During this, I'd accidentally bump off the little pauldron, but it fits really snugly, so I had no sweat getting it back in place. For some reason, out of all the details on this miniature, this little pauldron I'm most proud of. So we're going back to his axe, and I decided to fill in these divots using sprue goo. This is a bit of a messy job, especially if you apply more over an already drying area. This can cause a really ugly spiderweb effect, and trust me, you're not gonna fix it. However, if done correctly, this is very effective. It's actually quite similar to painting. You don't want to push your brush over an already drying area. Also make sure to add a little bit of pure Tamiya over this just to make sure it dries nicely in place. While it dried, I used this little piece of chainmail from a Death Guard kit to act as kind of a loincloth. On the backside, I guess. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, but his backpack is simply an old Chaos Marine backpack. Good and simple, and the details seem more fitting to an Iron Warrior. I feel like the new Chaos Marine kits are not very good for applying to Iron Warriors. They're a little too chaosified. The chainmail glued pretty seamlessly to the back, and the pack itself obscures any ugly adherence. As a finishing detail, I'd come back to the axe, and I'd sand it down on the sides, making it buffed out to one solid part. I'm really happy with this, and after doing so, I'd call him finished. This miniature was incredibly fun to build, and I think he looks good as is right now, but after painting, he looks incredible, and I am really happy with this miniature. I think he looks really accurate to his actual depiction, and I feel as if I really created something that has my own unique flavor to it. And I kind of forgot how much of a blast it is to paint Iron Warriors. Expect the painting video up a little later on. While this guy doesn't have the same reverence as Varzival Cervantes has to me, I did end up reading on him a little bit more during the painting process. And let me just say, this guy seems like a really well-adjusted young man. Dude's on his grind, knows what he's on about. I like it, I respect it. But anyway, all jokes aside, I hope this video is not only entertaining to you, but helpful. If it was, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with a friend. Maybe you got a buddy that paints Iron Warriors that really likes this character. But I think I've flapped my beak enough as is, and I'll leave you with a mishmash kitbash and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna, I promise. See ya!